The empty seats. Commander Marcus Webb adjusted his position in the observation chair, his eyes fixed on the massive holographic display that dominated the monitoring station's main chamber. For 3 years, he had watched the same scene unfold monthly, the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Federation. Representatives from 847 different species gathered in the neutral space station orbiting the ancient world of Nexus Prime. Yet something was always missing. Still staring at those empty seats, Dr. Helena Cross entered the chamber, carrying her usual stack of research files. As the station's chief xenobiologist, she had spent countless hours analyzing every species that participated in the assemblies. Marcus nodded without looking away from the display. 12 empty seats, Helena. Always 12. The same positions, the same absence. He gestured toward the gaps in the circular assembly hall. Every other species sends representatives. The crystalline collective, the void dancers, even the mysterious shadow weavers show up. But not them. Helena pulled up a chair beside him and opened her files. The Elders of the Stars, she said quietly. According to our intelligence, they're the oldest known civilization in the galaxy. Some records suggest they've existed for over 50 million years. And yet they refuse to meet with the other species when humans are involved, Marcus replied, his voice carrying a note of frustration. 3 years ago, before humanity joined the Federation, they attended every assembly. The moment we were granted membership, they disappeared. The pattern emerges. Helena spread several photographs across the table between them. The images showed previous assemblies, dating back 15 years. In each one, tall, luminous beings could be seen occupying those same 12 seats that now remained empty. The Elders appeared almost human in shape but stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies surrounded by a soft, otherworldly glow. Look at this pattern, Helena said, pointing to different images. Here they are, discussing trade agreements with the reptilian hegemony. Here, mediating a dispute between the machine consciousness and the organic unity. They were active participants in galactic politics for decades. Marcus leaned forward, studying the photographs more carefully. What changed? What made them so afraid of us that they'd abandon their role in the galaxy's governing body? That's what troubles me, Helena replied. According to the records, the Elders have survived galactic wars, cosmic catastrophes, even the extinction of entire stellar systems. They've seen species rise and fall, watched civilizations bloom and crumble. Yet humanity, a species that has barely reached beyond its own solar system, somehow terrifies them enough to break a pattern they've maintained for millennia. Whispers in the dark. The monitoring station's communication array suddenly crackled to life. Lieutenant Torres, the communications officer, looked up from his console with confusion written across his face. Commander, I'm picking up an encrypted transmission. It's using pre-Federation protocols, something I've never seen before. Marcus and Helena rushed to the communications station. On the screen, alien symbols scrolled past in rapid succession. Helena's expertise in xenolinguistics allowed her to recognize fragments of the ancient script. It's in Old Galactic, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The ceremonial language used only by the oldest species. But the encryption is unlike anything in our databases. As they watched, the symbols gradually resolved into readable text. The message was brief but chilling: the children of Earth carry the seed of ending. The watchers in the void remember what was forgotten. The cycle must not complete. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Children of Earth, that's us. But what cycle? What seed of ending? Before Helena could respond, the transmission cut off abruptly. Lieutenant Torres frantically worked his controls, trying to trace the source, but the signal had vanished without leaving any trace of its origin. Ancient fears. Helena returned to her research files with renewed urgency, pulling out documents that she had previously considered irrelevant. Marcus, look at this. I've been cataloging references to humanity in pre-contact alien archives. Most species viewed us as primitive, nothing more than another emerging civilization. But there are older references, scattered mentions in texts that predate our discovery of faster-than-light travel. She pulled out a translation of an ancient Zephyrian text. This passage refers to the young ones who dream in fire and wake the sleeping gods. And here, from a crystalline meditation scroll, when the dreamers of the third spiral learn to touch the void, the eldest shall retreat to the far places. Marcus studied the translations. Dreamers, children, the young ones, they're all referring to humanity. But why do they speak of us as if they knew we were coming long before we ever left Earth? That's not the strangest part, Helena continued. I found references to a prophecy, something called the awakening of the last-born. According to the fragments I've translated, the last-born would possess abilities that the older species have lost, powers that could reshape the very fabric of reality. The Watcher's purpose. As they delved deeper into the research, a pattern began to emerge. The Elders of the Stars weren't just another ancient species, they were guardians, watchers who had appointed themselves as protectors of the galactic order. For millions of years, they had guided younger civilizations, prevented catastrophic wars, and maintained a careful balance of power among the stars. They're not afraid of our weapons or our technology, Helena realized. They're afraid of what we might become. Every reference I can find suggests that humanity possesses some dormant potential that even we don't understand. Marcus turned back to the display showing the empty assembly hall. If they're so powerful, so ancient, why don't they simply eliminate the threat? Why retreat instead of confronting us directly? Helena's expression grew troubled as she pulled out one final document. Because according to this text, they've tried before. The translation is unclear, but it mentions the first attempt and the price of failure. Whatever happened in the past, it convinced them that direct confrontation with humanity would be disastrous. The weight of mystery. As their shift ended, Marcus and Helena found themselves with more questions than answers. The empty seats in the assembly hall now seemed less like an absence and more like a warning. Somewhere in the depths of space, the oldest and most powerful beings in the galaxy were watching humanity with a mixture of fear and anticipation. We need to dig deeper, Marcus said as they prepared to leave the monitoring station. If the Elders are right to fear us, then we need to understand why. And if they're wrong, we need to find a way to prove it to them. Helena nodded, gathering her research files. I'll contact my colleagues at the Xenological Institute. If there are more references to this prophecy, more clues about humanity's true nature, we need to find them. As they walked through the station's corridors, neither of them noticed the faint shimmer in the shadows behind them, or the soft whisper of movement that suggested they were not alone. The Watchers had watchers of their own, and humanity's journey toward understanding was about to become far more dangerous than either of them could imagine. The mystery of the Elders' fear was only beginning to unfold, and with it, the truth about humanity's place in the cosmic order. The distress signal. Captain Thomas Rivers stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Meridian, staring at the star charts displayed on the main screen. His ship had been investigating anomalous readings in the Kepler 442 system when they received an automated distress beacon from an uncharted world. What made the signal unusual wasn't its origin, but its age. The beacon had been transmitting for over 12,000 years. Captain, we're approaching the source, Lieutenant Sofia Martinez called from her communications station. As the ship's linguistics officer, she had been working tirelessly to decode the ancient signal. The transmission isn't random. It's a warning, repeated in 17 different languages, including several that predate known galactic civilizations. Thomas moved to stand behind her console. What kind of warning? Sophia's hands moved across her controls, bringing up the translated text. It's fragmented, but the core message is consistent across all languages. The inheritors must not remember. The gift becomes the curse. The cycle ends where it began. The dead world. The planet below them appeared lifeless at first glance, a gray, windswept world with no signs of vegetation or atmosphere suitable for known life forms. But as their scanners penetrated deeper, they revealed massive structures buried beneath centuries of accumulated dust and rock. Captain, I'm reading geometric patterns that suggest artificial construction, reported Chief Science Officer Dr. Patricia Wells from her station. The structures are enormous, some of them stretch for kilometers underground. This isn't just a dead civilization, it's a dead civilization that was more advanced than anything we've encountered. Thomas ordered a landing party prepared. Within hours, he found himself standing in the airlock with Sophia and a team of archaeologists, preparing to explore the ruins of a world that had died before human civilization had even begun. The underground city. The entrance to the buried complex was marked by symbols that Sophia recognized from her linguistic databases. They were similar to the scripts used by the Elders of the Stars, but far older and more complex. As they descended into the depths, their lights revealed corridors carved from a single piece of dark stone, walls covered in intricate murals that seemed to tell a story. Captain, these images, Sophia whispered, her voice echoing in the vast underground chambers. "They're depicting the history of the galaxy, but not as we know it. Look at this section, it shows the formation of the first galactic civilizations, but there are species here that aren't in any of our records." The murals showed a progression of civilizations rising and falling, but there was a pattern. Each cycle seemed to end the same way, with the emergence of a particular type of being, humanoid in shape but surrounded by an aura of energy that the artists had rendered in brilliant gold. Thomas studied the images more closely. These figures appear in every cycle. Who are they supposed to represent? Before Sophia could answer, they heard a sound that made them all freeze, a low, harmonic tone that seemed to come from the walls themselves. As they listened, the tone resolved into something that sounded almost like speech, but in no language any of them recognized. The memory vault. Following the sound deeper into the complex, they discovered a chamber unlike anything they had seen before. The walls were covered not with murals, but with what appeared to be crystalline formations that pulsed with a soft, blue light. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal supporting a sphere of the same crystalline material. "It's some kind of data storage system," Dr. Wells observed, running her scanners over the strange formations. "But the technology is completely alien to us. The crystal matrix appears to store information at a quantum level." Sophia approached the central sphere cautiously. As she drew near, the pulsing light intensified, and suddenly the chamber was filled with holographic images. They watched in amazement as the crystals projected scenes from the distant past, not just visual records, but somehow conveying emotions and thoughts as well. The images showed the final days of the civilization that had built this place. They were tall, graceful beings with an unmistakably human-like appearance, but they possessed abilities that defied understanding. They could manipulate matter with their thoughts, travel between stars without technology, and seemed to exist in harmony with the fundamental forces of the universe. The terrible truth. But the projections also revealed why this advanced civilization had died. As their abilities grew stronger, they began to lose control. Their power to reshape reality became a curse that turned against them. They could create, but they could also destroy on a cosmic scale. The final images showed their desperate attempts to contain their own abilities, to prevent their power from consuming not just themselves, but the entire galaxy. "They're trying to warn us," Sophia realized, her voice filled with horror. "This isn't just a record of what happened to them. It's a warning about what could happen to us." Thomas felt a chill of recognition. The beings in the projections didn't just look human, they were human, or something very much like what humanity might become. The implications were staggering. The projections continued, showing how the dying civilization had used the last of their strength to create the warning beacon, to leave a record for any who might follow in their footsteps. But there was more. They had also created guardians, watchers who would monitor the galaxy and prevent the cycle from repeating. The Guardian's burden. The final projection showed the creation of the Elders of the Stars. They weren't a natural species at all, but artificial beings created by the dying civilization to serve as eternal guardians. Their purpose was to watch for signs of the same abilities emerging in younger species and to prevent those species from making the same mistakes. "That's why they fear us," Thomas said, understanding flooding through him. "They weren't created to rule or guide, they were created to prevent another catastrophe. And they see in humanity the same potential that destroyed their creators." Sophia accessed more of the crystal records, her translation skills allowing her to piece together fragments of the ancient language. "There's more, Captain. According to these records, the cycle has repeated before. This isn't the first time a species has developed these abilities, and it won't be the last. But each time, the Elders have found a way to prevent the full awakening." The weight of the revelation settled over the landing party. Humanity wasn't just another species in the galaxy, they were potentially the most dangerous force the universe had ever known, carrying within them the power to create or destroy on an unimaginable scale. The hidden war. As they prepared to leave the memory vault, one final projection activated. This one was different, newer, more recent. It showed events from within the last few decades, scenes of human development that no ancient civilization should have been able to record. "How is this possible?" Dr. Wells asked. "These images show human space exploration, our first contact with alien species. But this facility has been dead for millennia." Sophia studied the projection controls more carefully. The crystal matrix isn't just storing old memories, it's actively monitoring current events. This entire facility is still operational, still watching, still recording. The implications were terrifying. If the elders weren't the only ones watching humanity, if there were other guardians, other systems in place to monitor their development, then humanity's expansion into the galaxy was being observed and evaluated by forces they had never even suspected existed. The choice ahead. As they returned to their ship, carrying copies of the crystal records and the weight of terrible knowledge, Thomas realized that their discovery would change everything. Humanity stood at a crossroads. They could continue their expansion into the galaxy, unknowing of the potential consequences, or they could confront the truth about their nature and find a way to control abilities they didn't even know they possessed. But there was another possibility, one that filled him with dread. If the elders had prevented other species from reaching full awakening, what methods had they used? And if they decided that humanity posed too great a risk, would they act to eliminate the threat before it could fully manifest? The return journey to Earth would give them time to study the records, to understand the full scope of what they had discovered. But Thomas knew that their time was limited. Somewhere in the depths of space, ancient guardians were watching, waiting, and perhaps preparing to act. The echo from the void had delivered its message, and now humanity would have to decide whether they were ready to face the truth about themselves, or whether that truth would destroy them before they ever had the chance to choose their own destiny. The underground discovery. Professor Daniel Foster brushed the dust from his hands as he stood before the massive metallic door buried 30 feet beneath the desert sands of Mars. His archaeological team had been excavating the site for months, following readings that suggested artificial structures predating human colonization by thousands of years. What they had found defied every assumption about the Red Planet's history. Agent Rebecca Stone descended the excavation ladder, her government credentials giving her access to discoveries that most civilians would never see. As a specialist in xenoarchaeological security, she had been dispatched from Earth the moment Foster's team reported finding technology that appeared to be of non-human origin. "Professor, have you attempted to access the facility yet?" Rebecca asked, examining the intricate symbols carved into the door's surface. Unlike anything in Earth's databases, the markings seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. Foster shook his head. "We've been waiting for authorization." "But Rebecca, you need to understand, this isn't just alien technology. The dating suggests this facility was built around the same time that the first elder civilizations were emerging. We might be looking at something that was meant specifically for humanity to find." The awakening chamber. When the door finally opened, responding to Rebecca's touch in a way that surprised both of them, they found themselves in a vast underground complex that hummed with barely perceptible energy. The corridors were perfectly preserved, as if they had been sealed yesterday rather than millennia ago. The architecture was somehow familiar yet alien, designed for beings roughly human-sized but with subtle differences that suggested a deeper understanding of space and form. Lights activated automatically as they walked, guiding them toward what appeared to be the facility's central chamber. "Professor, look at this," Rebecca called, stopping before a wall covered in what appeared to be star charts. But these weren't ordinary stellar cartography, they showed the galaxy at different points in time, with certain systems highlighted in various colors. "These markings correspond to the locations of every major civilization we've encountered. But they also show civilizations that should have existed but didn't." Foster joined her, his expertise in ancient cultures allowing him to recognize patterns that others might miss. "It's not just a map, Rebecca. It's a genealogy. Look at the connecting lines, they're showing the relationships between different species, how they influenced each other's development. And here," he pointed to a cluster of highlighted systems, "these are all the locations where civilizations disappeared mysteriously." The genetic records. The central chamber contained what could only be described as a library, but instead of books or data storage devices, information was contained within crystalline structures that projected holographic displays when approached. As they explored, they discovered that the facility was actually a repository of genetic and cultural information from across the galaxy. "This is impossible," Foster whispered as he accessed one of the crystal displays. "They have genetic records from species that existed millions of years ago, complete evolutionary trees showing how different life forms developed across different worlds. But more than that, they have records of genetic manipulation, directed evolution, artificial acceleration of natural development." Rebecca was examining another section of the archive. "Daniel, you need to see this. They have human genetic records here, but not just current human genetics. They have projections, models showing what human evolution might look like under different circumstances. And some of these projections show abilities that..." She paused, struggling to find words. abilities that would make us nearly godlike. The holographic displays showed human figures with enhanced capabilities, telepathy, matter manipulation, the ability to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But the records also showed the potential consequences of such evolution, simulations of how such abilities might affect not just humanity, but the entire cosmic balance. The architect's message. As they delved deeper into the archives, they discovered that the facility had been built by the same civilization whose ruins Captain Rivers had found, the precursors to the Elders of the Stars. But this repository contained something that the memory vault on the dead world had not, a direct message intended specifically for humanity. The message activated when both Foster and Rebecca were present, suggesting it required specific genetic markers to function. A figure materialized before them, tall, luminous, unmistakably similar to both humans and the Elders, but somehow bridging the gap between them. Children of Earth, the figure spoke, its voice somehow audible despite being clearly a projection. If you are seeing this message, then our greatest fear and our greatest hope are about to be realized. You have reached the threshold where choice becomes destiny. Foster and Rebecca stood transfixed as the figure continued. We were your predecessors in more ways than you understand. Not your ancestors, but your precursors, the first to walk the path you now travel. We achieved transcendence, but at a cost that nearly destroyed the galaxy. In our final moments, we created guardians to prevent others from repeating our mistakes, but we also created you. The terrible purpose. The revelation that followed shattered everything they thought they knew about human origins. Humanity hadn't evolved naturally on Earth, they had been designed, created by the dying transcendent civilization as a failsafe, a second chance to achieve what their creators had failed to accomplish safely. You carry within you the same potential that elevated us beyond mortal limitations, the figure explained. But you also carry modifications, safeguards that we hoped would allow you to transcend without destroying. You are our attempt to prove that conscious evolution could be achieved without cosmic catastrophe. Rebecca felt the implications crashing over her. We're not just another species. We're an experiment. A test to see if transcendence is possible without destruction. The projection nodded. But experiments can fail. The guardians we created, the beings you know as elders, were instructed to monitor your development and to intervene if you showed signs of following our path to destruction. They fear you because they have seen what your full potential could become, and they remember the price of uncontrolled transcendence. The hidden countdown. The archives revealed that humanity's development had been carefully monitored and subtly guided for millennia. Key moments in human history, technological breakthroughs, cultural shifts, even major conflicts, had been influenced by hidden forces working to either accelerate or retard human development depending on the perceived risks. There's a timeline here, Foster observed, studying a complex chronological display. It shows critical decision points in human development, moments when our species could have taken dramatically different evolutionary paths. And look at this, we're approaching another critical decision point. Soon. The display indicated that humanity was nearing a threshold beyond which their latent abilities would begin to manifest naturally. The genetic modifications built into the species were designed to activate under specific conditions, and those conditions were rapidly approaching. Rebecca accessed more of the archive's security files. Daniel, there's something else. The Elders aren't the only ones watching us. There are other guardian species, other monitoring systems, all designed to evaluate whether humanity will succeed where our predecessors failed, or whether we'll need to be contained. The choice revealed. The final section of the message explained the choice that lay ahead. Humanity could continue on their current path, allowing their abilities to manifest naturally while the galaxy's guardians watched and judged. If they proved capable of handling transcendence responsibly, they would be allowed to evolve and take their place among the cosmos's truly advanced civilizations. But if they showed signs of repeating the mistakes of their predecessors, the guardians would act to prevent another cosmic catastrophe. The methods available to them ranged from subtle manipulation to complete elimination of the human species. There is a third path, the projection revealed. You can choose conscious evolution, working with the guardians rather than being subject to their judgment. But this would require revealing the truth to your entire species, allowing humanity to make an informed choice about its future. As the message concluded, Foster and Rebecca found themselves holding information that could reshape humanity's understanding of itself and its place in the universe. They possessed the location of other archive sites, the genetic codes needed to accelerate human evolution, and most importantly, the communication protocols needed to contact the Elders directly. The weight of knowledge. As they prepared to leave the facility, both of them understood that their lives had been permanently changed. They carried the burden of knowing that humanity's fate hung in the balance, that decisions made in the coming months or years could determine whether their species would ascend to cosmic consciousness or face extinction at the hands of its cosmic guardians. The forbidden archives had revealed their secrets, but knowledge, they realized, was both a gift and a curse. Now they had to decide whether humanity was ready for the truth, or whether the truth would destroy them before they ever had a chance to transcend. The secret facility. Deep beneath the Colorado mountains, General Harrison Blake walked through corridors that officially didn't exist. The Prometheus Research Facility had been built in secret following humanity's first contact with alien civilizations, designed to study and prepare for threats that the public wasn't ready to know about. But recent discoveries had transformed its mission from defense to something far more complex. Dr. Victoria Lane looked up from her quantum field equations as the general entered her laboratory. As the facility's chief physicist, she had been tasked with understanding phenomena that challenged everything science thought it knew about reality. Her recent work had led to discoveries that kept her awake at night, questioning the very nature of human existence. "General, you need to see this," Victoria said, gesturing to the holographic display floating above her workstation. "We've been analyzing the genetic samples that Professor Foster's team recovered from Mars, and the quantum field readings are unprecedented." Blake moved closer to examine the display. As a career military officer, he was accustomed to dealing with threats he could understand: enemy nations, terrorist organizations, conventional weapons. But the data Victoria was showing him suggested a threat that transcended anything in his experience. The awakening symptoms. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" Blake asked, studying the complex molecular structures displayed in the hologram. Victoria manipulated the display, highlighting specific genetic sequences. "These are the modifications that were built into human DNA millions of years ago. They've been dormant throughout our entire evolutionary history, but something is causing them to activate. We've documented 17 cases in the past 6 months, individuals exhibiting abilities that should be impossible." She brought up a classified file showing surveillance footage from around the world. A woman in Tokyo moving objects with her thoughts. A man in London who seemed to phase through solid matter. A child in Sao Paulo who could predict events hours before they occurred. "The subjects don't understand what's happening to them," Victoria continued. "The abilities manifest spontaneously, usually during times of extreme stress or emotional intensity. But General, the quantum field distortions they're generating, they're affecting reality at a fundamental level." Blake felt a familiar chill of responsibility settling over him. "How many people know about this?" "The research team here, plus a handful of intelligence assets monitoring the subjects. We've been able to contain public knowledge so far, but that won't last much longer. The manifestations are becoming more frequent and more powerful." The evolutionary catalyst. Victoria led Blake to another section of her laboratory, where sophisticated scanning equipment surrounded a chamber containing what appeared to be ordinary space. But according to the readouts, the space inside the chamber was anything but ordinary. "We've determined what's triggering the genetic activation," she explained. "It's exposure to quantum fields generated by faster-than-light travel. Every time humanity uses FTL technology, we're bathing our entire species in exotic energy that activates these dormant genetic modifications." Blake studied the data with growing concern. "How long do we have before the effects become widespread?" "Based on current projections, we're looking at exponential growth. Within 5 years, thousands of humans could be manifesting these abilities. Within a decade, it could be millions. And General, our simulations suggest that once a critical mass is reached, the effects will cascade globally almost instantaneously." The implications were staggering. Humanity was approaching an evolutionary threshold that would transform the entire species, whether they were prepared for it or not. And based on the warnings they had discovered, the galaxy's elder civilizations were watching and preparing to act. The historical pattern. Blake requested access to all classified files related to unexplained phenomena throughout human history. As he and Victoria reviewed the records, a disturbing pattern emerged. Throughout history, there had been isolated incidents of individuals exhibiting extraordinary abilities, cases that had been dismissed as myth, legend, or fraud. "Look at this correlation," Victoria pointed out, overlaying historical data with astronomical records. "Every major spike in unexplained phenomena corresponds with periods of increased cosmic ray exposure or unusual stellar activity." It's as if the universe itself has been slowly preparing humanity for this transformation. They found references in classified government files dating back decades, Project Blue Book's unexplained cases, Soviet psychic research programs, Chinese studies of individuals with unusual talents. All of it pointed to the same conclusion: the genetic modifications had been trying to activate for generations, but only now had the conditions become right for widespread manifestation. Blake accessed files that few people had clearance to see, records of government contact with non-human intelligence dating back to the early days of space exploration. Victoria, look at this. Every alien species that made contact with us before joining the galactic community asked the same questions about human genetic diversity and evolutionary potential. They weren't just being scientific, they were evaluating us. The Guardian Protocol. Their investigation led them to discover that Earth's governments hadn't been entirely unprepared for this scenario. Hidden within layers of classified protocols was something called the Guardian Initiative, a secret agreement between Earth's major powers and certain alien species to monitor and manage humanity's evolutionary development. The Elders weren't the only ones involved, Blake realized as he read through the classified communications. There's been a shadow network of species working to either accelerate or suppress human development depending on some kind of cosmic risk assessment we're not privy to. Victoria accessed more recent communications intercepts. Harrison, some of these messages are from species we've never officially had contact with. They're discussing humanity as if we're some kind of collective responsibility. And the tone, they're not just concerned about us. They're arguing about us. The intercepted communications revealed a galaxy-wide debate about humanity's future. Some species advocated for allowing natural evolution to proceed, believing that humanity might succeed where others had failed. Others pushed for immediate intervention to prevent what they saw as an inevitable catastrophe. The quantum threshold. As Victoria's research progressed, she made a discovery that changed everything. The abilities manifesting in humans weren't just psychic phenomena, they were quantum mechanical effects that allowed consciousness to directly interact with the fundamental structure of reality. General, we're not just talking about telepathy or telekinesis, she explained, showing him quantum field equations that described consciousness as a fundamental force. The genetic modifications allow human consciousness to operate at quantum scales, to manipulate probability fields, to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Blake studied the theoretical framework Victoria had developed. What are the implications for someone with fully activated abilities? They would be capable of reshaping reality at will. Matter, energy, space, time, all of it would be malleable to a sufficiently developed consciousness. In essence, they would become living gods, limited only by their understanding and will. The revelation explained why the galaxy's elder species were so concerned. A species with godlike abilities but without the wisdom and restraint to use them responsibly could pose an existential threat to all life in the universe. The coming crisis. Their research revealed that humanity was rapidly approaching what Victoria termed the quantum threshold, the point at which enough individuals would possess activated abilities to trigger a species-wide evolutionary cascade. Computer models suggested that once this threshold was crossed, every human being would develop transcendent abilities within a matter of months. We have perhaps 2 years before the cascade becomes inevitable, Victoria reported. And based on the alien communications we've intercepted, the galaxy's guardian species are preparing to make their decision about humanity's fate well before that happens. Blake realized that they were facing a crisis that dwarfed any threat in human history. The species stood at the threshold of godhood, but their cosmic neighbors were preparing to sit in judgment of their worthiness. And if humanity was found wanting, the consequences would be extinction on a scale that would make all previous threats seem trivial. As they concluded their briefing, both Blake and Victoria understood that they were among the few humans who knew the true scope of what was coming. The shadow of the past had revealed humanity's destiny, but whether that destiny would be transcendence or annihilation remained to be seen. The next phase of their investigation would require direct contact with the forces that had been shaping humanity's development from the shadows. And that contact, they realized, might determine not just the future of their species, but the fate of the entire galaxy. The First Contact Protocol. Ambassador Nathan Cross stood in the diplomatic wing of the Luna station, staring at the quantum communicator that had remained silent for 3 days. After months of careful negotiations through intermediaries, the elders of the stars had finally agreed to direct contact with humanity. But the meeting would be unlike any diplomatic encounter in human history. It would determine whether humanity would be allowed to evolve or be eliminated as a cosmic threat. Colonel James Parker checked his equipment one final time. As the head of Earth's Special Contact Division, he had been chosen to provide security for this unprecedented meeting. But he understood that conventional weapons would be useless against beings who had existed for millions of years and possessed technology that bordered on magic. "Ambassador, we're receiving a signal," reported the communications officer. "They're requesting permission to materialize a representative in Conference Room Alpha." Nathan nodded, feeling the weight of his species' future on his shoulders. "Grant permission. And Colonel, remember, we're not here to negotiate from a position of strength. We're here to understand our place in a universe far stranger than we ever imagined." The Elder's arrival. The air in Conference Room Alpha began to shimmer, reality bending as something that existed beyond normal spacetime manifested in their dimension. The being that appeared was tall and luminous, clearly the same species depicted in the ancient records they had discovered. But there was something profoundly sad about its presence, as if it carried the weight of cosmic responsibility that had long since ceased to bring any joy. "I am Keeper Zethran," the being spoke without moving what appeared to be its mouth, the words forming directly in their minds. "I have watched over this galaxy for 47 million years, and I have seen the rise and fall of 10,000 civilizations. I have come to speak with humanity because your species approaches a crossroads that will determine not just your fate, but the fate of all life in this region of space." Nathan stepped forward, drawing upon years of diplomatic training to maintain his composure in the presence of a being whose very existence challenged human understanding. "Keeper Zethran, we are honored by your presence. Humanity has many questions about our nature and our future." The Elder's form seemed to pulse with ancient sadness. "I know of your questions, Nathan Cross. Your species has discovered much in recent months, the ruins of our creators, the genetic modifications built into your DNA, the abilities that now begin to manifest among your people. But there is more that you must understand before the final choice is made. The original sin." Zethran gestured, and the room filled with holographic images showing the galaxy as it had existed eons ago. Countless civilizations thrived among the stars, connected by trade, culture, and shared knowledge. It was a golden age of cooperation and growth that had lasted for millions of years. "This was the galaxy before the Transcendence," Zethran explained. "Our creators, your genetic predecessors, were the crowning achievement of this civilization. They possessed abilities that allowed them to shape reality with their thoughts, to exist simultaneously across multiple dimensions, to manipulate the fundamental forces that govern existence." The images shifted, showing the same civilizations but now in chaos. Stars went nova without warning, planets disappeared from their orbits, entire solar systems were transformed into configurations that defied physics. "But transcendence without wisdom is destruction," Zethran continued. "As our creators' abilities grew, so did their impact on reality itself. What began as miraculous healing became uncontrolled transformation. What started as traveling between stars became tearing holes in spacetime. They became gods, but gods without the restraint necessary to preserve the universe they inhabited." Nathan watched in horror as the holographic display showed the death of galaxy-spanning civilization. How many died? Trillions upon trillions. Entire species wiped from existence not through malice, but through the uncontrolled exercise of transcendent abilities. Our creators realized too late that consciousness, when amplified beyond certain thresholds, becomes a force of chaos rather than creation. The Guardian's burden. Colonel Parker leaned forward. "But they created you to prevent it from happening again." Zethran's form seemed to dim with the weight of memory. In their final moments of clarity, before transcendence consumed them entirely, our creators made three choices. First, they created us, artificial beings designed to be immune to the genetic modifications that had led to their downfall. Second, they seeded certain worlds with life that carried those same modifications but in dormant form, hoping that evolution might find a safer path to transcendence. Third, they created failsafes, ways to prevent the modifications from activating if the risk proved too great. The implications hit Nathan like a physical blow. Humanity is one of those seeded species. "You are the seventh," Zethran confirmed. 6 previous species developed the same potential. 2 we were able to guide to safe transcendence through careful intervention over millions of years. 3 chose to suppress their abilities when they understood the risks. 1. The Elder paused, its form flickering with what might have been regret. 1 refused to accept limits and had to be contained. Nathan felt a chill run through him. Contained how? Their homeworld was placed in temporal stasis. They exist, but outside the normal flow of time, their abilities frozen along with their consciousness. It was the only way to prevent them from destroying themselves and everything around them. The human anomaly. Zethran continued its explanation, but the holographic displays now showed Earth and humanity's development over the past 1,000 years. But you are different from the previous species. Your development has been unusual. The genetic modifications in your DNA are more complex, more sophisticated than those in any previous species. Our creators learned from each failure and refined the design. Colonel Parker studied the genetic comparisons being displayed. What makes us different? Previous species developed transcendent abilities gradually, over hundreds of thousands of years. This allowed us to guide their development, to teach them restraint and wisdom alongside power. But humanity's modifications are designed for rapid activation. Once triggered, your entire species will develop full abilities within a single generation. Nathan realized the scope of the crisis they faced. You don't have time to guide us. We'll either succeed or fail based on who we are right now. Precisely. And this terrifies us, because while your genetic modifications are more sophisticated than any previous design, your species has shown troubling tendencies toward conflict, toward using power for dominance rather than harmony. The test of worthiness. The Elder's form began to shift, becoming more solid and somehow more human in appearance. However, there is something about humanity that gives us hope. In our millions of years of observation, we have never encountered a species that questions its own worthiness as consistently as yours does. Most species that develop transcendent abilities become convinced of their right to reshape reality according to their will. But humans, even as your abilities begin to manifest, continue to ask whether you should use the power you possess. Nathan felt a spark of hope. Is that enough? Does our capacity for self-doubt prove that we can handle transcendence responsibly? It is the only evidence we have ever found that suggests transcendence might be possible without cosmic catastrophe, Zethran replied. But evidence is not proof. Your species stands at the threshold, and within the next solar year, the genetic cascade will begin whether we intervene or not. The question that remains is whether we allow you to face that threshold on your own, or whether we act to prevent another potential catastrophe. Colonel Parker stepped forward. What would intervention look like? Zethran's response chilled them both. We would introduce a genetic virus that would suppress the transcendent modifications in your DNA. Humanity would continue to exist, but the potential for transcendence would be eliminated permanently. You would remain a normal, mortal species, limited to conventional technology and lifespans. The choice revealed. But there is another option, Zethran continued. We can provide you with the knowledge and guidance that previous species received over millions of years. We can teach you to control transcendent abilities before they fully manifest. But this would require your species to make a collective choice, to accept the responsibility of godhood and all the restraints that come with it. Nathan realized they were being offered something unprecedented, a chance to prove humanity's worthiness not through gradual development, but through conscious choice. What would that involve? Full disclosure to your entire species. Revealing the truth about human origins, about the abilities that lie dormant in your genetic code, about the cosmic responsibility that transcendence entails. Then allowing every human being to choose whether they want to proceed with activation or accept suppression. The magnitude of the decision overwhelmed Nathan. They were being asked to essentially offer every person on Earth the choice between remaining human as they understood it, or becoming something far greater and far more dangerous. The final warning. As the meeting drew to a close, Zethran delivered one final message that would haunt Nathan for the rest of his life. Ambassador Cross, you should know that not all of the elder species agree with this approach. Some believe that the risk is too great, that humanity should be suppressed immediately regardless of your potential. Others believe you should be eliminated entirely, that even suppressed humans might eventually find a way to reactivate their abilities. Nathan felt the weight of cosmic politics settling around him. How long do we have to decide? The genetic cascade will begin within one Earth year whether we intervene or not. But the Elder Council will make its final decision about humanity's fate in 90 of your days. If you choose to proceed with conscious transcendence, we will guide you. If you choose suppression, we will help you implement it safely. But if you cannot reach a collective decision. The Elder didn't need to finish the sentence. Nathan understood that indecision would be interpreted as a lack of the wisdom necessary for transcendence, and the consequences would be final. As Zethran's form began to fade, returning to whatever dimension the Elders inhabited, Nathan and Colonel Parker were left with the knowledge that would reshape human civilization. They had 90 days to prepare their species for the most important choice in the history of consciousness itself. The awakening truth had been revealed, and now humanity would discover whether they were worthy of the cosmic destiny that had been designed into their very DNA, or whether they would join the countless species that had failed the ultimate test of transcendent responsibility.